Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Monday, September 28th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The first football Saturday of the Big Ten season is now 26 days away, and the game against Michigan kicks off in 75 days. And while the Big Ten is not playing yet, we did just have what kind of felt like the first real college football weekend of the year. It had a comforting assortment of, familiar themes like Oklahoma not having a defense, some crazy upsets, dramatic comebacks, and Florida State completely humiliating itself. And now the Buckeyes are back in the rankings for both the coaches and AP polls. Now that the Big Ten is officially playing again, Ohio State is sixth in both the coaches poll and the AP poll. Buckeye Scoop beat reporter Tony Gerdeman joins me this morning. And Tony, how much does it really matter where the Buckeyes are in the polls at this exact moment?
Not much, Tom. Next
Holding your fingers apart doesn't really work on a podcast. I can see you.
It doesn't matter all that much. For one, the Buckeyes aren't even playing yet, and so many voters aren't even voting for them. For two, now that we have a playoff, the only way a vote matters is if there would be for me, in my opinion, the only way the vote matters is if there's a split national champ where the AP decides to go off the reservation and vote for somebody other than the college football playoff winner. So I think we both kind of share the same feelings on the polls. As they've diminished in importance over the years, and since the playoffs are certainly less important than ever. And now they're even less important until everybody is playing again and everybody is voting for everybody. I saw national reporter Brett McMurphy, maybe some of you have heard of him before, released his ballot and said he wasn't voting for any of the teams not playing. And then I saw somebody ask him, were you doing that before? Or, because did you have no SEC teams on your ballot before they started playing? Or are you just doing that now because your love affair with the Big Ten? So who's to say, Tom? But yeah, I don't get too worked up about the polls. I don't think fans should either. I think preseason polls are kind of fun because it's you look at the SEC teams that are ranked in the top 10 that won't be there by the end of the season, and that's always fun to keep track of, or maybe to see where Michigan starts out because that's something else to keep track of. But right now, when voters aren't even voting for everybody, it's less than meaningless.
Yeah, I think people might be wondering, how would Ohio State have gone from 2 to 6, 2 in the preseason to 6 now? You've got people, they're still getting first place votes in both polls. So some people are just voting based on, here's how good I think these teams are. Some people are just doing straight resume ranking. And that was, I think, what McMurphy was doing, which is, who has the best win? Okay, you're number one. Who has the second best win? Okay, you're number two. So Mississippi State, who just won on the road at LSU, might go from unranked to the top 5 in someone's ballot in the span of a week. And then when you mix all those together, that it sort of balances itself out, but Ohio State not being on some ballots knocks them down a few spots in that poll. But, again, I think there is an argument to be made at some point that the poll number sort of shapes the narrative a little bit, but this early in the year, it's just, I think everyone knows this is going to be a weird year. And if Ohio State wins the Big Ten, even with maybe one loss, you started to see some of the SEC teams that I think people were thinking, oh, this is going to be such a great deep conference. We'll get into some of these games, but LSU, nope. Texas A&M did not look great. Georgia did not look great for a half. There was a whole bunch of people not looking fantastic on Saturday, and we'll see how that plays out over the course of the year. But speaking of teams that didn't look fantastic on Saturday, let's talk about the Oklahoma Sooners. Woo, that was an Oklahoma Sooner performance, all right. Kansas State last week lost to a Sun Belt team. Kansas State was playing without 5 of its defensive backs from its 2 deep. And, mighty Oklahoma and that brilliant Lincoln Riley offense. And, boy, that's all great. But you got to play defense at some point, and nope, didn't happen.
Are you sure you have to play defense? Is that because I don't think it has gotten through to Oklahoma. Now, it has certainly gotten through to the guy who writes the checks and the salary of that defensive staff and Alex Grinch's $1.4 million salary. So they know you have to pay for defensive coaches, but then I think the next step is requiring some sort of improvement from that defense. And what we saw was certainly not that. Although, Tom, I will say, Oklahoma held Kansas State to 66 yards rushing. So let's give the defense some credit there. But this is a game that if it was next month, we probably would say, watch out for this. But it's just so early in the season. Like, Oklahoma is going to have one of these games. I didn't expect it in week 2, or I guess for week 2 for Oklahoma in their second game of the season. And it's you're watching it, they're up big, and then Kansas State just keeps fighting back, which is kind of that's their MO. Kansas State just scraps, claws. It's never pretty, and then all of a sudden they're tied, and now you've got redshirt freshman quarterback Spencer Rattler. Like, what just happened? And now everything is on me, even though it's kind of on the Oklahoma defense, and they're done, Tom. They have to be done at this point. There's no reason to give them any benefit of the doubt, because even undefeated, we know what happens when they make the playoffs. And so I don't want to hear any more Oklahoma talk. I don't care.
Right, and that's something I said that on Twitter Saturday before the game was even over. I said, even if they win, like, this is exactly the same Oklahoma team you've seen for the last like 6 years. And guess what? They get to the playoff and it's like, yes, their defense is bad, but the offense is so incredible that it won't matter. And that all sounds great, and their quarterback is a Heisman finalist, and then they play their semifinal game and get absolutely buried again. But now it doesn't look like they'll even get there this year, so problem solved. And there was another Big 12 power that looked on Saturday afternoon like it might be in that same boat, Texas, which was playing Texas Tech, a team that just barely squeaked out a win over Houston Baptist the week before. And Texas was down 15 points with 3 minutes and some change left and scored a touchdown, recovered the onside kick, scored another touchdown, made the 2-point conversion, got it to overtime, and won it from there. And I mean, am I wrong? That felt like a stay of execution for Tom Herman as the head coach of the Longhorns.
No, I think you're right. And you just wonder how much longer they could keep doing this. Chris Ash, new defensive coordinator, comes in, and you're expecting some improvements, and it still looks just as bad as it always has. Now, granted, Texas Tech has a good offense, but should they be putting up 56 points in regulation on Texas? No. If you are a national title contender, if you are a top 10 team, I don't think anybody should be putting up 56 points on you. And then that just goes back to your statement about Oklahoma. Should we even, if they go undefeated, they're there. Texas is there. But maybe don't spend any of your money with the bookie on Texas if they do make the playoffs, because the Big 12 just continues to show us that the front four isn't there. A lot of times the offensive line, like with Oklahoma, isn't there. And I just don't know if the determination is there. It's when you can just get run on and scored on, there's a part of your defense that just isn't, I guess, into the game enough, or too soft to contend. And when you're talking about contending with Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State up front, soft is never a word you're going to hear used on either side of the ball.
Yeah, looking at the potential playoff field, you always wonder, how much of an advantage is it really to be the number 1 overall seed? Well, last year we saw, if that means you get to play Oklahoma instead of Clemson in the first round, it's a real big advantage. And the team that had that advantage last year, LSU, not going to have it this year. They started the post Joe Burrow, post Joe Brady era, and didn't go great. They had Mike Leach and the air raid, and Mississippi State coming to Death Valley, and all KJ Costello did. KJ Costello, the transfer from Stanford, who didn't exactly put up pinball numbers with the Cardinal passing the ball. And his first game after the all of the will the air raid work in the AC and the SEC talk. I don't know. You tell me. 36 for 60, 623 yards, 5 touchdowns. He broke the all-time single-game SEC passing record by 81 yards, and he did it in the very first game. Seems like the air raid might be okay in the SEC, especially considering he did it against a school that likes to call itself DBU. Thoughts?
Boy, DBU, when they give up, they had Mississippi State had 3 receivers over 100 yards receiving in that game, and it was just like guys in the backyard playing catch and or more like keep away because their LSU DBs were in the middle. They weren't actually like close to the receivers. It was like they were in the middle between the quarterback and the receiver, and you had dudes running open all day long. And you and I have talked about LSU is just going to revert back to what it was before Joe Burrow and Joe Brady. I don't think we thought it would be this soon in game one. And sure, Tom, LSU lost a bunch of players, but you know who always loses a bunch of players? Really good teams, national title winners. I saw on Twitter the first national champion to lose their season opener since Michigan in 1998. Of course, that was a whole loss following a half national championship, so that was doubly worse. This was just one loss following a whole national championship, but not a good sign for the future of Ed Orgeron, who is what he is. And I was baffled by people who just continue to point out all that LSU lost as if this is the outlier. Like 2020 isn't the outlier for LSU. 2019 is the outlier for Ed Orgeron. Look at everything else he's done, and you've got like this waveform and then big spike of national championship, and then it goes back to reality. And now LSU is back to reality. And oh no, the SEC West seems to be better than it has been in a while with now Mississippi State. And let's give Lane Kiffin a little bit of credit at Ole Miss for coming in with at least one half of a good offensive game plan this week as well.
Yeah, they kept it interesting against Florida for a little while. They think they finished with 35 points or something like that. They gave up 50, which makes 35 not enough. But I mean, the rest of the SEC West, there was a bunch of, Texas A&M barely squeaked one out over Vanderbilt. That ended up 17-12. There were a lot of teams that just didn't look great, and I think you're going to have that on a week-to-week basis this year, just with all the uncertainty and the weird. Everyone's out of their rhythm, and no one had a great, the normal fall camp. But what has jumped out to me a little bit is the teams that are not having that issues. The teams that are seem to have like none of the focus issues. Alabama came out and just like paved Missouri, and they did exactly to Missouri what Alabama is supposed to do to Missouri. They did to Missouri what Texas A&M should have done to Vanderbilt but couldn't. What LSU probably was expected to do to Mississippi State but couldn't. You're seeing that from Alabama. Clemson has looked very good the first couple weeks. My assumption looking at this is the Alabamas and the Clemsons and the Ohio States are going to be kind of on one level, and then all the other teams that are just like not as great culturally, or not maybe quite as on that same level of talent where they can just completely outman you. I think you're going to see kind of one level of consistency out of kind of the elite teams and another level out of kind of everyone else who's just kind of okay.
Can I throw is it crazy to throw Miami in that group?
Yeah, I
if we're just basing
it
off of what you just said, looking impressive, then I think we put them in there knowing that it's been UAB, FSU, and Louisville, who are say what you want, but at least they've done what they were supposed to do and then some. 2017 they started out 10-0 and then finished 10-3 with those last 3 losses all being by 10 or more points. So maybe they're lining up for something like that. Although I believe Clemson is coming up here on the schedule eventually.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Clemson in 2 weeks, and then we can have that Miami conversation. I will say, I mean, they absolutely annihilated Florida State, and I think that tells me probably like 30% that Miami is pretty good, and Miami has guys in the trenches on both sides of the ball that they have not had in the past. That's one of the reasons they all of a sudden have like that vintage looking Miami defensive line again. And it's like, okay, that's now something where it's not just, oh, look, we have a turnover chain. We've got the swag like we used to. Like, no. Here's a little hint. It was not the swagger that made those old Miami teams good. It was really good butt-kicking play in the trenches that made those old Miami teams good. So if they've got that now, they've got like Jalen Phillips, who was the number 1 overall player a couple of years ago. He transferred from UCLA, and hey, he turns out he's a good football player and has been a good impact player for them off the edge. De'Aaron King transferred from Houston, good impact player at quarterback. But man, oh man, Florida State, holy Moses, they are I mean, Mike Norvell missed the game because he has COVID. And boy, that is just a program that just is in complete disarray. And it's like they keep changing direction, and it's like it never actually seems to get better.
Like who can change that program around? It would have to be like Urban Meyer, Nick Saban, Dabo Sweeney, just somebody that can change the entire culture of the program, because it's all broken. Like every part of it is broken. And Willie Taggart didn't last long, and it's going through all of these different guys, and nobody actually ends up steering things in the proper direction. And I don't know if they're not getting enough time, but the time they're getting, they're doing nothing with. And in fact, they're losing ground. And so how long can you let them run adrift and run aground before taking the wheel back and trying to give it to somebody else? I don't know. Maybe the guy who turns it around, he's probably in like the 8th grade right now. It's just so far gone. And yeah, there's tons of potential at Florida State. It is what it is. And maybe Mike Norvell will be the guy. But so far, I don't see any indication that he's doing any better. It's horrific watching them.
Yeah, they had issues over the offseason where, he said he talked to all the players after some of the social justice stuff came out as issues over the offseason, and then you had players come out on Twitter like, no, you didn't. You didn't have individual conversations with me, so no, you didn't. And yeah, I mean, you don't want to lose the locker room that early. And I think they maybe thought he had maybe kind of gotten control back again, but that is not a good start, and it has not been a good start on the field for them either. One team that seems like it may be off to, set up for a good start is Ohio State. We got to talk to offensive coordinator Kevin Wilson last Friday, along with the tight ends. We have more interviews coming up this week. If you want to hear our Tony and I have a conversation about what we learned from Kevin Wilson and the tight ends, you can find that by searching Buckeye Weekly, or that was the episode that dropped on Friday. We did an episode just on that press conference, so you can find that and all the great podcasts from Buckeye Scoop by just searching Buckeye Scoop on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spreaker, whatever your podcast platform of choice is. You can subscribe to all of our shows right there. Leave us a 5-star rating and review. That will help other folks find our shows as well. We have a whole nother week of interviews coming up as Ohio State's fall camp heads into its 2nd week. So we will have plenty of great coverage for you on all of that stuff at buckeyescoop.com. A lot of it is free and outside the paywall, but there's even more great stuff inside the paywall for our members, including our Ask the Insiders board, where we've had very lively and active conversations for several weeks now about kind of what we're hearing, what we're seeing, and what could be to come for Ohio State this fall. It is shaping up to be a pretty memorable season. So maybe a good time to join buckeyescoop.com. And guess what? We're close enough now that your first month includes a game week, includes actual game coverage. That's pretty darn good. We are getting there, folks. All right. Thank you guys for joining us. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.